I expected Portugal to be a first world country, and it is on the surface, but I think there's a lot of it that's not.
Hey, I'm Josh, and this is Expats Everywhere, the channel that brings you information on moving and living abroad, especially if you're interested in Portugal. In today's interview, I sit down with Travis from Australia. He and his family moved to Portugal in 2017 as he wanted to start an unusual business after being inspired by his time living and traveling abroad. To say that he's faced challenges both in business and adapting culturally is an understatement. And just to let you know something that we haven't shared on YouTube, this interview was taken from our podcast, Expats Everywhere Presents Let's Move to Portugal, where we've done over 30 interviews from people just like you that have moved to Portugal. You can search the podcast by name or click the link in the description section below. Season 2 starts soon. Travis, we caught you in the distillery, so I'm sure we're going to talk about some spirits here in a minute, but let's first talk about the spirit of why you moved to Portugal. What was going on in your life that you said, hey, I want to make this move to Portugal?
Look, I've been working as an expat for about 10 years, and I was at a point in my career where I couldn't see the future. And I think, to put that into perspective, for the 10 years, it had been places like Saudi Arabia, which you know well, Josh.
Yeah.
Mongolia, Iraq, the UAE, and then the last posting was Nigeria. And I'd built a reputation for myself as being a good operator in those environments. But all I could see was that was the future. There were no good, easy, soft gigs for me. I wasn't going to Singapore, I wasn't going to London or the US. I was always going to be stuck fixing up other people's mistakes and messes. And, I got to a point where I just started saying to management, you're recruiting the wrong people, because what you should be doing is recruiting the right people, and then I wouldn't need to be here. I could go and get one of those good jobs in somewhere that's a little bit easier, to live and work, and especially live as a family. So I think that was really the catalyst. I just didn't want to keep working in corporate. Just so many bad decisions made on a daily basis that affect so many people, and I just wanted to do something for myself. And I had this realization that I wanted to do something in beverages, and my mate and business partner Jim is American, and we started making beer together. And then on a trip to South Africa as a family holiday with a group of friends, expat friends from Mongolia, I had this idea that we should do rum. I was just headstrong and thought, that's what I want to do. I want to make rum. And then I just started making it happen. The first step was where, right? So that's really how Portugal came about, because we had to find a location to do it. And I said to Jim that the rule for both of us had to be that it had to be neutral ground. So it couldn't be the US and it couldn't be Australia. And Australia, I guess, really from a perspective where it's the tyranny of distance. It's just so far away from everywhere else. And so,
right.
On the research that I was doing originally was in South Africa to be near Stellenbosch, and then looking at Mauritius, Panama, Spain, France, and then it came about, like Jim and I had done a distilling course in the US in Kentucky, and we had this Foursquare rum that was a port finished rum, and that pretty much sealed it, that what we should do is actually set up in Porto, the home of port wine, and make rum here.
Okay.
That's how it happened. Yeah.
Be close
Crazy
to the barrels,
idea.
right?
Yeah, be close to the barrels. It was, you could set up somewhere else and then import the barrels, but it just seemed to make sense to actually go where the port's made and do something different. And that's about as far as I got in terms of, research.
Well, do something different. You definitely
easy.
did.
Sounds easy in principle, right?
So before we dive into the drink, let's talk a little bit about your transition time in Portugal, because it wasn't as if you were just starting this business and that's all you were doing. You also have family life, and you have your personal life that's all going on at the same time, and you can't just drown yourself in your business. So
I did a bit of that. I definitely
drowning yourself,
drowned myself in the business. Yeah. So we moved here as a family, and we'd moved. We at one point we'd lived in 4 countries in 6 years. And not easy places. So we went from Mongolia, which was a pretty good, stable environment for 2 years, to Iraqi Kurdistan up in the north. From a family standpoint, everything was very disruptive. And I think that was a motivator as well in a lot of respects, to actually move somewhere that was safe and stable.
Yeah.
At the time, Portugal was, I think, number 4 on the safest countries in the world list. I think it's number 5 now. I think it just dropped a spot.
Mm.
But yeah, moving here, it was the first place that we'd lived in 10 years where you could drink water from the tap and walk down the sidewalk, with no issues. And I remember telling this lady that I met that we were living in this particular part of the city, and she was like, "Oh, it's so dangerous there." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I've just come from a place where there's razor wire and guards with machine guns patrolling our place at nighttime in Nigeria. This place is super safe." So, but I think it was a bit of a shock in some ways, because instead of moving as an expat, which we'd done so many times, with a huge support network of HR departments and drivers and just on the ground support and income, right, wages, to move to a new country, I think it took a little bit of time to actually understand that we were migrants. We weren't expats anymore.
Okay.
And I think I understood it before anybody else. I think Andy, my wife, and the boys were probably expecting that there'd be another move at some point, but I was adamant. I mean, I just wanted to put down roots, buy a home, which is what we did. We had to set about renovating that, and I don't, Josh, you probably hear them all the time, but there's horror story after horror story of people that bought properties here, and whether it's through the purchase process or once they've bought it, all the problems, start to become apparent. And it happened to us. I mean, we had a roof that leaked, but we came in 2017. It was one of the longest summers that Portugal had in years. They had huge bushfires, but no rain. So between the time that we bought the house and moved in, there'd been no rain. This was right up until December. And then we moved in.
And you didn't know?
No, and the whole place leaked, and even the garage where we were storing all of our stuff, that leaked as well. We just had leaks everywhere, and it was, and all every single light fitting had been pulled out of the house, and we just expected that the fittings would be there when we came in. So when we came in, we basically just had bare wires in every room. Then it went from being the long hot summer to a really cold winter, and it was freezing cold, and we had a small fireplace and single pane glass windows. And it was like my friend described it as camping inside. It was that cold.
Yeah.
And so there was one shock and then another shock, and it was just like, wow, we were really totally underprepared for what to expect in terms of understanding housing and what properties are like. So I think that was a big shock to the system. And actually understanding that we were migrating. We weren't living this expat life that we'd been living previously. So, that was a bit of a change.
Okay, so before I ask you how you coped with those changes, I do want to ask you, how do you define expat versus immigrant?
Well, I think expat is when you're working for someone else, and or you're working for yourself. You're an entrepreneur, expat, I guess. But you've got a support network in place. So, I mean, I've met a lot of people that have moved to Porto that have moved here for work. And, they get put up in a service department when they first arrive, and then there's support in terms of, where to find a property to live and how to navigate whether it be the tax system or the healthcare system. Moving here as a migrant, you don't have that support network in place. Well, I didn't. I mean, there's a lot. You guys do what you do, and there's a few other groups around that do it. But at the time, in 2017, there was not really a lot here. And even Facebook groups, there wasn't really a lot going on. It was more social than, I guess, migrant support. So it was a transition. I mean, I lived a privileged life. We all did.
Yeah.
We used to holiday a lot, and I earned really good money, and we had drivers and chefs, and you name it. It was an extremely privileged life. And then to move into an environment where, I used to have 15 direct reports. I've got no direct reports, and everything that I need to do, I have to do on my own.
Yep. It's interesting that you differentiate it like that, which, I mean, I think still by kind of the definition or the motives and why you moved, Kalie and I would consider you guys as migrants too, because you said that you wanted to move and really put roots down and like essentially you're here to stay for the foreseeable future.
I wanted to stay long enough, and I'll put a caveat in there. I mean, the other driver was to move to Europe and to allow both the boys to have a European passport, because that provides a huge benefit to them in the future in terms of employment, that by being dual citizens or dual passport holders, that just gives them a huge future. And so the whole 5-year process of temporary residency, moving into permanent residency, and then citizenship was a key driver as well for moving to Europe, Portugal.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we've definitely lived the expat life like you, where we were on expat packages and the company was taking care of like all the relocation stuff. But for us, what an expat is someone who has moved with the intention of it being temporary or at least like a certain time period. And usually you get put on these contracts, right? You get put on a 2-year contract or even a 6-month contract, as little as that, or maybe a 5-year contract for some people that get moved to maybe Dubai or Saudi Arabia. But then after that, you leave and you go on to the next place, maybe with your company. Okay, so jumping back into some of the issues you ran into when you first migrated, how did you cope with that stuff?
Well, probably not as well as I should have. I think I managed it okay, but I think I'd come from a high octane job. I traveled, not once a week, once a fortnight. I had a lot of staff, so I had a lot of responsibility, and I guess I just took it on, right? And that's just what I did. Whether it was finding health insurance or working out how to get the house fixed, finding contractors. I'm pretty resourceful. And that's really what it was. Got the boys into school, sorted out temporary accommodation for a while. I mean, it's just you just get on and do it. Look, I don't know if it's any easier as a family or as an individual. I think both probably comes with stresses on both sides. But it is a tough, because you've just got to work out it's like everything's new. We eat similar foods, and you have to learn how to drive on the other side of the road sometimes. Into Australia.
For Americans, no, but
No, for Americans, no. But there were just lots of little things that it took a lot of time to achieve. And I worked on the rule of 3, right? And I used to work on the rule of 3 regularly, even before moving to Portugal. But it would take 3 attempts to achieve something. You meet someone that whether it be an electrician or a plumber, and you think, that's going to work, and then they let you down, and then you try again, and then you try again. It's not, and I know, that's the same in most parts of the world, but here, I think with the language barrier and managing expectations, that's probably what I didn't do well enough. I expected Portugal to be a first world country, and it is on the surface, but I think there's a lot of it that's not, and I think my realization probably came maybe a couple of years down the line, where I looked further at the history and the fall of Salazar's regime back in '74. That
which
the
is not that long ago.
50 years, right? So, but you put that into perspective and say, well, 95% of the population couldn't read or write. Everything was church and state. Nobody was allowed to free think. They were basically controlled on every level. So for it to have come as far as it has in 50 years is pretty remarkable. But it's generational change before it'll get to a point where those expectations are met, whether it be just with, I don't know, customer service is probably a big one. But it's come a long way, but it's still, it's still got a way to go, I think, especially from a social aspect.
Have you ever then, in your 6 years of being in Portugal, have you gotten to a point where, or you've thought about ditching it, giving up, doing something somewhere else? Yeah,
definitely.
What's kept you here then?
Because I'm a stubborn person, and I don't like to lose at anything.
Okay.
And I honestly believe that what I'm doing is a good thing. even now, I mean, I look at my face and I look at how grey I've become in the time that I've been here, and I only had a little bit of grey when I moved to Portugal. But this place is, having lived in places like Nigeria and Saudi Arabia and Mongolia and Iraq, I've said to plenty of people, it's been easy to get things done in those emerging markets than it is to get something simple done here. And a friend of mine said that it's, the Portuguese have an innate ability to take something simple and make it complicated. And that's, well, I think that's just something that you come to terms with. I think maybe I'm on the 7 steps to enlightenment, and I'll find peace. I've shaved my head a few times. It didn't work. It was impacted by the pandemic. We couldn't have got a worse trifecta, really. I mean, we got a pandemic, we got Brexit, and we got a war, all in a short space of time, and it was just like being kicked to the curb every single time. And yeah, I could have packed it in a few times. I really could have, but then because I kept thinking about what I used to earn, and what I used to earn, and then what I used to save, and how far I'm down in the last 5.5 years, and it's a lot of money, Josh. And
sure.
I haven't earned a full-time wage in nearly 6 years, and and I came here with a war chest, and that's gone. I've got a coin purse now. I've gone from a war chest to a coin purse.
Hopefully it'll build back up, because
I will. The business is built. I mean, we've got we're putting rum down in barrels, and
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and that's their assets, right? I mean, if I look at the valuation of the distillery at the moment in terms of insurance value, and I don't think the place will burn down. So, but insurance value, it's about $500,000, right? So, for all the work that we've done, it's in a good place. But yeah, it's I could have easily chucked it in plenty of times, but then I would have just continued to feel bad about giving up, because I just don't like giving up.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I want to touch on. I thought the rule of 3 really hit me, because I just experienced it yesterday.
Right.
A buddy of mine and I were going to renew our passes for FC Porto, right?
Okay. Yep.
So Kalie and I we renewed our passes last week when the window opened to do that, because the season starts like in about 4 weeks. So Kalie and I go to renew, but we had some American friends of ours who left, and
took their tickets on. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have their seats we know that are available. And what we were trying to do is just change their name on the seat to 2 other people, to Valencia, our daughter, and then this other guy. So Kalie and I ask if it's possible. We go to the FC Porto store in downtown. We ask if it's possible. And the guy's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's possible, but I'm not 100% sure what you need. He said, take these 2 forms. I think you're going to need these, and go to the store that's up by the stadium, because that's the main store. He said, for any new people, they can get a member's card. It's called a socio. They can get a member's card on the spot, printed on the spot, instead of it being mailed. And then there you should be able to make the change. So we messaged our 2 friends that we were changing the tickets for. They're back in the US. So we're like, hey, we would like to put Valencia in one and our friend in the other, who's actually their friend too. We'd like to put them on your seats. Can you just write us an email? And like, Bob's your uncle, like everything should be cool.
Yep.
So we go with like a bunch of different citizen cards and all sorts of, ID documents. And we go yesterday, and the lady's like, oh, you need this form. And they have a form, but they didn't have the form in the Baisha store.
Right.
So now we have to get the form sent over to our friends. Our friends then have to print out the form in the US. They have to print out the form, sign it, take a picture of it, send it back to us. And then I'll be going a 3rd time to then finalize this. Hopefully. If the rule of 3s works, it'll be that.
It does. If the rule of 3 works, but then it's arbitrary, right? Because it's also depending on whether you get the same person to talk to again, or there's someone else. And that happens regularly in every department. And you think you've nailed all the information that you need, and then the next time you go back, you talk to the colleague, and they go, no, it doesn't work that way. And I mean, a good example of that is Seth, right? I mean, with the immigration process, I mean, I've been to Porto, Braga, Villarreal, and Figueira da Foz, and they tried to send me to Funchal. They tried to get me to go to Funchal in Madeira, right? Fly to Madeira to go to a Seth appointment.
Crazy.
And every single office had a different process. One would require a photocopy of every page of your passport. The next one didn't. One would ask for passport photos, and another one would go, "Why are you giving me passport photos?"
We'll take your photo here.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hang on. This is supposed to be a national system, right? So why isn't there a national process?
Yep.
Why would you have in 4 different offices 4 different processes? I mean, that just makes no sense at all. And I think that's part of, I don't know, that's just part of the frustration that you have to go through, because I think, we all expect, when you fly into a beautiful airport and you come in on beautiful roads and you see all these beautiful buildings, and, it's got one of the best internet connectivities in Europe. And you just expect everything to be perfect and to work.
Functioning.
And it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? It just
doesn't. That's so true. That is a great way to put it. I hadn't thought about just how disjointed it is and how some things function and others don't. And it really just goes back to like setting the right expectation. Just have the expectation some things are going to work and other things are not. And
I mean, a good example of when it does work is working with like one of the big hardware store chains here, Leroy Merlin. Is, if you buy something there and you don't use it, you can take it back and get a refund there and there on the spot. And that refund is valid for 6 months, not 7 days, right? And so there's unique parts like that where I just go, wow, it's really amazing the way it works, right? But I don't like to say that I accept the way that things are, because it frustrates me that I have to accept it. But it's just the way that it is.
So the question I wanted to come back to was, just to clarify, the visa that you moved on, was it the D2?
I don't know, mate. I tried to.
The reason why I ask this is because you did say that the value of your company is $500,000. So I don't know. I didn't know if at the time you did a golden visa.
I didn't do a golden visa.
Okay.
Look, I worked out that. Look, it was pretty simple for me on the golden visa. With 4 of us, I think I worked out with the upfront costs and then the annual fees. It was going to cost us like $80,000 in fees
for the golden visa.
The golden visa, and the golden visa is suitable for people that can commit to coming for 1 week per year.
Yeah, that don't want to live in Portugal.
They don't want to live in Portugal because they're living somewhere else, and that's why there was a huge spike in Middle Eastern, Chinese, Turkish,
Russian,
Iranian, Russian, lots of people from places that were looking for another passport in another country to live in, but didn't have to actually commit to living here. In person, I just think the country opened its doors and it just wasn't structured to manage the volume of people that were coming in from Brazil and China and India and everywhere else. Yeah. It was bursting at the seams. I mean, I think at one point it was taking over 6 months just to get an appointment.
There have been a lot of challenges and kind of waves in terms of how the immigration process has been through CEF.
And I feel sorry for a lot of people, the people that were working in that department, because they were doing the best. They were doing the best that they could. And really, I think at the base of it all of it, like, Portuguese people are really nice people.
For sure.
So, they got put into a ridiculous position, and they made things happen the way that they needed to get it done. But that just put everything under pressure.
You have found a connection with Portugal and with Porto, where you're currently based, and you're trying to make connections even more with your business. The name of the gin is Invicta, which is named after the city being never being toppled, right, by any sort of outside conqueror.
Yeah, the unconquered, the unvanquished and that's, it's I think it's at the heart of Porto as a city. They're really proud people, and we tried to do Porto gin, but you can't, because the IBDP, which is the Port Institute, own the words Port, Porto, and Porto. So that name was gone, but the next best option was Invicta, which is a fantastic name. So we're really happy with it.
You're paying homage to the city with the nickname of the city.
Yep.
And you have a lot of marketing fun that you can do there.
Yeah. I don't speak Portuguese, if that's the question that you're going to ask. I can get by, Josh. I can order food. I can say thank you. I can ask for directions. But normally everybody reverts to English. I think it's an 85% literacy rate for English in the northern part of
Portugal. 7th highest in the world.
Yeah, it is. And I always use my justification as to why I didn't immerse myself into the languages, because I was too busy building a distillery, and teaching myself how to distill. I was learning about intellectual property, how to be an electrician, how to be a plumber, how to be a carpenter, how to be a procurement specialist, I was so busy doing everything else. I didn't have time to learn the language. And we live in a part of the city it doesn't have that same literacy, English literacy, but it doesn't impede what I do day to day. I can still swear at the guy up on the roof and tell him to stop banging in English.
What was the first words that you learned?
No, well, he understands all the English words.
Oh, in English. In English. Well, those are the first words he learns.
No, and then the intent behind it. So let's say, my point was made, and his point was made back to me. But then I had to make my point to the landlord and say, "Hang on, man, you can't just go ahead and arrange for contractors to come in. I'm running a business downstairs, and you've got big clompers banging around on the roof upstairs." So
okay, so let's take a minute and brag on what you have done with your business over the past couple of years, because in June 2021, you really launched these products out in the market, right?
Opened. Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
we soft opened into the market. We launched our first 3 products, which is the Invicta gin portfolio, which is our international dry, our Portuguese citrus, and our navy strength. In April of the following year, we'd been awarded a gold, 2 silvers and a bronze for our 3 products. This was the London Spirit Competition and the International Wine and Spirits Competition. And in the London Spirit Competition, we were up against, I think, maybe 15 Portuguese distilleries. And out of those 15, there would have been about 30 gins in total. And we won the only gold for Portugal. And I think it's still the only gold that a Portuguese distillery's won at the London Spirit Competition. So, to go from a zero start to that type of industry recognition, because it's all judged by industry people, was just a huge event. I think a huge feat.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of that. The whole reason for coming here was to be successful, Josh, not to
absolutely
do something and just do it for the sake of doing it. The reason to move here was to do it and actually be successful at doing it.
And I think that you've done it. I mean, I know that you're waiting on that gold, but I think you've already done something super special. I've had both of the rums, love them. I send people your way often.
I know you do. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're welcome. At Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives. In short, how has living abroad transformed your life?
In every way. I mean, I think I wrote in my brief, I grew up in a little country town in South Australia. And I don't think there was ever much belief for people outside of that town, right? You either went back onto the family farm or you moved into agriculture of some sort, or you went to the biggest city. And for us, that was Adelaide. But, my grades are always terrible at school. And, I think I had a fairly active imagination and, always, I think in some ways believed that I was capable of doing things that maybe other people didn't think I was. I'm a twin, so that makes me competitive. My brother and I would compete on everything, throwing rocks against the base of a tree, who could get closest. Or, I think if I look at where I've come from and where I am in terms of what I've achieved, at 52, I've lived and worked in 9 countries. I've got a master's in international business, and I've got 5 international medals in an industry that I've never worked in before. I'm pretty proud of what I've done. You get one life, so you should make the most of it.
And it sounds like you are. Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Cheers, mate.
Take care, man.
See you.